Today we're discussing Unit 11, Eschatology, Part B, Cosmic Eschatology. Now, this is the part everybody likes to talk about, but unfortunately we just don't have a lot of time to talk about it. So if you want to do more in-depth study on eschatology, when Jesus is going to return, I suggest you write your research paper on that. Hopefully you've already done that at this point in time, but it's a good topic for further research for you. This is the most prophesied event in the New Testament. It occurs more than 250 times. What's going to determine your viewpoint when it comes to eschatology are several things. We'll talk about some of the scriptural foundation. But one of the most important things is, are the prophecies going to be fulfilled literally or figuratively? Most of the Old Testament prophecies in the coming of Christ were fulfilled literally. And so if you take the view that the prophecies are to be interpreted literally, it's going to impact where you land on this issue. For example, Revelation 20, 1 through 6. Your interpretation of this passage, if you take it literally as a literal millennial reign, will make you a premillennialist at that point. If you take it in a spiritual sense, then you could be an amillennialist or a postmillennial person holding to that view. So we continue on down through here. I'll let you read that. Romans 11 also is going to interpret it. If you take it literally, as though those are going to be fulfilled just to Israel and not to the church, it's going to affect where you come down on this eschatological viewpoints. 1 Thessalonians 4:17 will determine whether you hold to a rapture or whether you don't. So that could affect not your millennial viewpoint, but your view of whether you're a pre-tribulation or a post-tribulation viewpoint. Looking at Matthew 24, there's other material. We just don't have time to go into a lot of this, but I'll leave it all for you to read there. Under the historic views, you need to know that the millennial reign, the discussion of eschatology, has not throughout history been as important as it is in modern times. Through some of the books that have been written, through movies, through those type things, it's become a popular discussion in our time. And so we have to be careful not to overemphasize eschatology. Theological formulation, the nature of the return of Christ. We know that Christ will return. We know that he's going to come in a future time. We know that it's going to be unexpected. We know that it's going to be personable and visible, and in person and visible, and that's important to remember and important to emphasize. And then also we understand that nobody knows when Christ is going to return. Important point for you here. Don't try to pick a date. I still remember the book 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back, 1988. He was only wrong 88 times. That's probably the only merit of the book. I'm just kidding. But don't pick a date. Be careful, very careful when you say Jesus is coming back or this person is the Antichrist. We're not given a lot of information on some of these things, and it's difficult to pick them out with that type of clarity. And we understand Scripture says no one will know the time. It also tells us, though, there will be signs so that we should not be surprised, deceived, or caught unprepared. And so make sure you're ready for the return of Christ. We should preach the imminent return because that's what the New Testament seems to indicate. How you view God's wrath will also impact your views on eschatology. Let me explain what I mean by that. Do you believe that God will pour his wrath out on believers? We've seen throughout history where God has poured his wrath out. Just think the flood. But in the flood, you had the ark in which Noah was able to travel through safely. Think of Sodom and Gomorrah, yet Lot was rescued out. When God's wrath has come, it has not usually fallen to the destruction of believers. So some take that to say God's going to get his believers out of the way. Others say, well, he's just going to take care of them through that wrath, like he did with Noah and the ark. And so how you take your views on God's wrath, whether he will pour it out on believers, and whether he's going to get the believers out as he did with Lot, or whether he's going to take them safely through it as he did with Noah, it's going to affect some of your positions, specifically on tribulation. All right, the views that you need to go through. Postmillennial view. It believes that Christ bound Satan in his first advent, but goes further to assert that through the preaching of the gospel and the power of the Spirit operating in this world, the world as a whole will eventually respond to the gospel and reach a golden age of peace, prosperity, and widespread adherence to the gospel. That age is identified as the millennium. Basically, this view believes we're going to preach so well, we're going to evangelize so well, the Spirit's going to move so well, that one day we'll reach this golden age of human society. This view has not been widely held since the world wars took place and since we have seen just how depraved our society really is. This was an optimistic outlook, probably too optimistic on Satan being bound, too optimistic on the ability for us to get the world to be basically completely saved. And so that's the postmillennial view. Amillennialism sees Christ's millennial reign as occurring now in heaven through the church, and that at his first advent, Christ bound the devil, so now the church can win people to Christ. The 1,000 years in Revelation is figurative for them, and so it's the whole age between his first coming and his second coming. This view may have too strong or too optimistic an outlook on the binding of Satan, and it doesn't take literally Revelation 20, it takes it figuratively. And so that would be the two issues that I would have with this particular view. Historic premillennialism is the premillennial view, but in the tribulation discussion, it's the post-tribulation view of the rapture. Premillennialism is the view that the binding of Satan is a future event and it will occur at Christ's return. That Christ will return before the millennial reign, but where it occurs in the tribulation is not important with premillennialism, and so it can recur with historic at the end of the 7-year tribulation. And the millennial reign will be an earthly reign of Christ in which at least some dead believers will be raised to rule with Christ. In contrast to historic premillennialism, you have dispensational premillennialism. Now, both of these believe in the literal 1,000-year reign of Christ, but historic believes that Christ, the rapture or the calling up or those that are raised from the dead will take place at the end of the tribulation. The dispensational viewpoint believes it will take place at the beginning of the tribulation. When the period of the church is ended, it will be raptured by Christ prior to the 7 years of great distress called the tribulation. During that time, Christ will work again with the people of Israel, and so it sees those prophecies fulfilled literally to Israel. Many will be converted during this time of great persecution. After the 7-year tribulation, Christ will return and set up his literal millennial reign of 1,000 years, approximately 1,000 years. I have a chart here for you to help explain what I've gone through rather quickly. You can read through the notes, email me if you have any questions, or post them to the discussion board. Here's your practical application for this. The doctrine of when Christ will return, premillennialism versus, I like premillennialism because it takes the scriptures literally. But whether you're pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, pre-wrath, post-tribulation, a lot of views we didn't even cover in this overview, it's not vital to your faith. What is vital to your faith is to remember that Christ is coming back. The New Testament indicates that Christ is coming back imminently. We should be watching, we should be waiting. It's one of the reasons I like the pre-tribulation view of the rapture and premillennialism, is it could occur at any moment. We don't have to wait for some 3.5-year mark of the abomination of desolation. We understand that Christ could come back at any moment, and that's kind of the whole tone of the New Testament and tenor of the New Testament. There are dangers with the other views. Dangers of postmillennialism is it can lead to a premature triumphalism. Danger of amillennialism is it overestimates the boundness of Satan. He seems pretty active to me in this current world. Dangers of premillennialism is that it's been accused of fostering a negative, pessimistic, escapist attitude towards society and social action. We shouldn't do that. We should seek to help people. We should be involved socially. We should be involved politically. We should be good citizens of this earth, and so we have to watch against that as well. We have to make sure that we don't go that route. Another danger that I don't think I have listed for you here is that if premillennialism is wrong and the tribulation occurs, you could have a great falling away of people who just stop believing because they haven't been prepared properly for suffering. So we have to make sure that when we teach this view, we teach it with the right amount of caution. We teach it understanding that we don't know everything and we never will know everything. But we also need to make sure in our eschatological view we teach an imminent return of Christ so that we are prepared and not caught off guard. And we need to make sure that we present the gospel to every person because we know that Jesus Christ will return. And we listen to the Gospel of Mark where he says, be on the alert, be ready at all times. If you have any questions about this section, email me or post the question in the discussion board.